Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Danielle, aka Stitcherista here on YouTube, and this is another diamond paint with me while I read two true crime stories. So first off, I did a bunch of stitching yesterday, and I'm almost finished the piece I was working on because it is a small piece. It is one of three small Valentine patterns that Cherry Hill Stitchery did. And I love it so much, and the other two in the set use the same colors, so I decided I'm going to stitch those as well after I finish this one. And I purchased 3 boards from Starry Night Studios to finish them all on so they are identical. And I think I even have a spot in my office where I'm going to hang them like in a row vertically. So I think that's what I'm going to do. They definitely need to be hung together. I mean, they're all going to be finished the same way. I think it's going to look really cute. I enjoyed stitching on it very much, and all 3 will be done with black perforated paper. Actually, there's another spot I could put them. I might do that. This is a voiceover. Obviously, you're seeing me work on Twilight Rose by Hannah Lynn, but I'm currently sitting in my office filming the voiceover part, and there is a spot above my office door where I currently have 3 very old Lizzie Kate patterns that I did, and I might pull those down and put these up there. They would be a nice addition up there. That's actually a really good idea. Okay, anyway, on to the true crime stories now. So the very first one is called Mary Farmer. Thou shalt not covet. Thus saith the good book, meaning the Bible. But Mary O'Brien Farmer, a supposedly devout Irish Catholic, appears to have skipped over that part. Specifically, Mary had a covetous eye on the property owned by her friend and neighbor Sarah Brennan in the village of Brownville, Jefferson County, New York. This was a fine, well-maintained house that Sarah shared with her husband Patrick, known as Patsy. It was quite unlike the tumble-down shack that Mary lived in. Her other half, James Farmer, was a mill worker with an overt fondness for the bottle. So he was an alcoholic. He had little interest in home maintenance or social climbing. Mary, though, was determined to get ahead in the world and had set her sights on the Brennan property. And since she lacked the finance to purchase the house, even had the Brennans been inclined to sell, she decided to obtain it by deception. During her frequent visits with her friend, she learned that Sarah kept the deed to the property in a black oilcloth pocketbook in her bedroom. In October 1907, while Sarah was out of the house, Mary snuck in and stole it. And what is she thinking she's going to do with that? I guess we're going to find out. About a week later, on October 31st, so Halloween, mind you, Mary Farmer showed up at the Watertown offices of attorney Francis P. Burns, claiming to be Sarah Brennan. Now, you have to remember this is 1907, so probably having to show ID or anything probably wasn't a thing like it is now. Like, you would never get away with that now, unless you had ID saying you were Sarah Brennan. Here, she presented the deed and asked that the property be transferred to her friend Mary Farmer. Good night. Okay. With no reason to suspect deception, the unsuspecting attorney obliged and prepared the paperwork. Again, you would just do that on someone's word. But this is 1907. Mary then forged Sarah's signature, and the documents were forwarded to the county clerk for registration. And just like that, Mary had gained possession of the house she coveted, albeit illegally. Highly illegally, yeah. It is difficult to understand what Mary Farmer's objective was at this point. The fraudulent deed wouldn't put her in the Brennan property and would only get her arrested if it ever came to light. Oh no, does she plan on killing them? This is a true crime story. But Mary had a plan. In January 1908, she visited another Watertown attorney and had the property transferred from her name to her infant son, Peter. Returning home that day, she told her husband that she had received a bequest from an uncle in Buffalo and had used the money to buy the Brennan house, paying $1,200. I don't know what that is like in today's money. I mean, this is 1908, so $1,200 sounds like a whole lot of money. She then leased it back to the Brennans, charging them $2.50 per week in rent. Can you imagine if that was the rent now? $2.50 a week? Yeah. You can imagine what happened next. James Farmer wasn't the kind of man to hold his tongue, especially when he had been drinking. Soon, he was boasting all over town about his wife's good fortune and astute investment. In such a tiny community, it wasn't long before word of this reached Sarah Brennan. Of course it would. Come on now, ma'am. Sarah initially laughed it off as small-town gossip, but the rumors persisted, and they began to annoy her. Eventually, on the morning of April 23, 1908, she marched down the hill ready to have things out with Mary, and that was the last time that Sarah Brennan was ever seen alive. That's immediately sus, right? Over the course of that day, Mary Farmer was seen shuttling between her house and the Brennan property. Later that evening, Patsy Brennan returned from work to find himself locked out, his wife nowhere to be found, and the spare key missing from its usual hiding spot. As Patsy was puzzling over this odd set of circumstances, Mary showed up and informed him that Sarah had left him and sold the house to her. This woman has some balls. I have to say that. I don't know how you would even go through with that. Even more perplexed now, you think? Patsy hung around on the porch until it was dark. He then borrowed a ladder from a neighbor and climbed in through a second-floor window. After spending the night at the property, he went to work as usual the next day. He arrived home to find an eviction notice waiting for him. So bizarre. The following day, Saturday, Patsy Brennan traveled into Watertown to make inquiries regarding his wife. However, he failed to learn anything regarding her whereabouts and eventually returned to Brownville, where he found that the Farmers had moved into his house. He demanded that they leave, but Mary produced a copy of the deed naming her as the legal owner. She then offered Patsy a deal saying that he could stay so long as he didn't kick up a fuss about the sale. Can you imagine someone doing that to your house? I read a book a long while ago, and I want to say it was called The House. I don't know if that's correct, but something like that was done. It was a good book, if I remember. There was twists and turns in it. It had house in the title. My House. Something. Okay. Patsy agreed to the deal, but the following morning he was back in Watertown. This time he visited the district attorney's office and reported his wife missing, voicing his suspicion that the Farmers might have had something to do with her sudden disappearance. The Farmers, meanwhile, had employed a few of James's drinking buddies to help move their possessions from their shack to the far more handsome Brennan property. One of these items was a large trunk that took 2 men to lift. Good God. We know Sarah's body is in that trunk. Come on. Mary Farmer personally supervised the removal of this item, fussing and flapping and urging the men to be careful, since the trunk contained stuff that she didn't want broken. Right. She directed the men to place the trunk in a back room and then to pile other items on top of it. By the time they were done, it was barely visible under the rubble. Now, unless Mary was really smart and that trunk is seal-proof or something, Sarah is going to start decomposing and it's going to stink. Yes. By mid-afternoon, the Farmers were all moved in. Mary got to work doing some washing, but she was interrupted by a constable dispatched by the DA to inquire after Mrs. Brennan. Given what Mary had previously told Patsy, her answer was odd. She said that Sarah had gone into Watertown to have her teeth fixed. What kind of dental work were they doing in 1908? I mean, this is a long time ago. This is 2024. 1908. Nonetheless, the constable didn't press the issue and soon left. That same night, Mary sent for the parish priest and asked him to pass a blessing on her new home. I bet she did. She should have had a sage all up in that motherfucker. Like, she should have been cleansing the house of her demon devil ways, for sure. But if Mary thought that she had successfully hoodwinked the forces of the law, she was sorely mistaken. I mean, this wouldn't be a story if she wasn't caught, right? On Monday, April 27th, the sheriff arrived with a team of deputies and demanded to know what she knew of Mrs. Brennan's whereabouts. Mary insisted that she knew nothing but was powerless to prevent the officers from carrying out a search. It wasn't long before they found the trunk in the back room. Asked about this, Mary said that it belonged to her husband. And then he was equally adamant that the chest was hers. So, yeah. The sheriff then instructed his men to open it. The moment the lid was flipped, a sickening odor pervaded the room. What did I say? Sarah Brennan was crammed inside the trunk, her body fully dressed, drawn into a vaguely fetal position, face to the floor, knees drawn into her chest, feet angled upward towards the lid. The area where her head was positioned was thick with congealed blood, the source of which was a horrible injury to the back of the skull. It appeared that she had been struck with some blunt instrument, perhaps the back end of an axe. The blow had been delivered with enough force to shatter the carapace, leaving the brain matter exposed. Oh, no. Mary and James Farmer were both arrested and charged with murder. Initially, Mary took responsibility, saying that she had struck Mrs. Brennan from behind while she was standing in her kitchen looking out of the window. But then she had a change of heart and tried to pin the murder on her husband, James. That's fabulous. According to this revised version of events, she and Sarah had gone into Watertown together and had arrived home to find James in a foul mood because she had left their baby with a neighbor. She had gone to retrieve the toddler, and when she returned just minutes later, she found Sarah dead from a blow to the head and James cramming her body into the trunk. Mary would tell another, even more unlikely story before she was through. In this version, Sarah had arrived at her house feeling unwell. She had told Mary that she was in so much pain that she wished someone would take an axe and knock her brains out. Mary had then picked up the hatchet and obliged her. It wasn't a murder, she insisted, but a mercy killing. Let me tell you what I think happened before we even go on. Sarah came down to Mary's house and said, "Bitch, to get your name out of my mouth. Stop telling rumors that you own my house, blah, blah, blah." And they were fighting and Mary killed her. Yeah, I'm sure that's what happened. By the time Mary Farmer went on trial at the Jefferson County Courthouse on June 16, 1908, her lawyers had concocted yet another defense, now claiming that their client was insane. Yeah, that's plausible. Truly insane to have to do something like that and go through all of those steps. They also had a backup plan asserting that Sarah Brennan had attacked Mary and that Mary had acted in self-defense. This could have been true too. Because imagine Sarah's anger when she went down to confront Mary. Because you know that wasn't a civil conversation. No. Unfortunately for them, the jurors weren't convinced by either of these stories. After deliberating for only 3 hours, the all-male jury returned its verdict, guilty as charged. The judge then pronounced sentence of death, which the accused accepted without any show of emotion. After a failed appeal, Mary Farmer went to the electric chair at Auburn State Prison on March 29, 1909, becoming only the second woman electrocuted by the state of New York. According to the priest who attended her, she died a good Catholic. Really? I don't think so. Maybe she repented at the very end and asked for forgiveness and all of that, but good night. The merits of that claim are at best debatable. Nonetheless, Mary did come clean before her execution, leaving a note in which she took sole responsibility for the murder and absolved her husband of any involvement. Despite this confession, James was nonetheless tried, convicted, and sent to await execution on the same cell block as his wife. Wow, so it makes you wonder, I mean, was he even home at the time when this happened? He was in a cell only a few feet away from the death chamber when Mary was put to death. James would remain on death row for 53 weeks before his conviction was eventually overturned. He was formally acquitted in 1910. Well, at least there's something. Thereafter, he returned to Brownville, to his old job at the mill, to his drinking buddies at the local tavern, to the shack he had once shared with his wife. What happened to their child, I wonder? Like, okay, you're in jail for over a year and a week, and then you just come right back into your life. Interesting. Okay, I like those old ones, though. I like the old stories of crime better than the brand new ones. Okay, the next one is Tony Frato. Tony Frato was a nobody at West Wendover High, a bookish introvert who certainly did not count herself among the popular students. Girl, same. Like, I was a nerd in high school. I was in the marching band. I had some friends. I was pretty smart. I got good grades, but I wasn't killing it in the popularity department. And you know what? I was okay with that. I just wanted to get through school. It was therefore a surprise to everyone when one of the school's cool kids, 18-year-old Cody Cree Patton, took an interest in her. Cody was the archetypal, is that how you say that? Archetypical? I guess that's how you say it. So he was the typical bad boy, frequently at odds with the school authorities. But he could also be sweet. And it was this combination of nasty and nice that proved irresistible to Tony. Of course it did. I'm telling you, there are many women, girls that like the drama, that don't want to be bored in a relationship. So a normal, sane relationship is boring to them. They need the drama. They need the excitement. Thinking about that just saps my strength, makes me tired. She fell hard for Cody, so hard that when he suggested that they get married, she immediately said yes. The fuck? What? Why are they getting married? They're not even out of high school yet. Tony's parents were less than enthralled by the idea of their 18-year-old daughter becoming engaged to a young man who had not yet graduated high school. Really? Yeah, you think? I mean, come on now. Yet they knew Tony. She could be strong-willed and determined. Standing in her way would open up a rift between them. Their daughter might walk away and marry her teenage boyfriend anyway, then she would be lost to them. Kind of like in Roseanne when Becky married Mark. Do you remember that? Did you see that show when it was on? Yeah. And so the Fratos came up with a compromise. In January 2011, they invited Cody Patton to move into their home. What? Wow. Okay. Perhaps they thought that they'd be able to have a positive impact on the young man's life if he was living with them. Perhaps they believed that they could subtly dissuade the young couple from rushing into marriage. Cody, at a loose end after being thrown out by his father, was happy to accept. This is going to go horribly sideways. Obviously, it's a true crime story. Now, how it becomes a true crime story, I can't possibly imagine yet, but this is not going to end well. And these are young kids. One crisis had been averted in the fledgling romance, but another would soon raise its head. It came in the form of 16-year-old Michaela, quote-unquote, Mickey Costanzo, a junior at West Wendover High. Mickey was a pretty and popular girl, a star athlete, the editor of the school newspaper. She had known Cody Patton for most of her life, and the two of them were friends, their relationship strictly platonic. But that didn't wash with Tony. She demanded that Cody stop talking to Mickey. When that ultimatum didn't work, she angrily confronted Mickey in the school hallway and warned her to stay away from her boyfriend. The outburst left Mickey perplexed. This is heading in a very bad direction. I mean, you have to also think that 18-year-olds, hormones are high, emotions are high. You know, your brain hasn't finished developing yet until you're actually 25 years old. So, decision making, yeah. And then there was the bizarre incident with the box cutter. The fuck? What? Tony had demanded a show of loyalty from Cody, and he chose to comply in a curious way. One day, he crept up on Mickey in the school playground and without warning slashed her across the forearm. The wound did not run deep, and Mickey did not even report it to the school authorities. But the incident left her badly shaken. Much to Tony's delight, she cut off all contact with Cody. The high school melodrama should have had its final act right there. Regrettably, it did not. I mean, what the... Oy, 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 these people. On the afternoon of March 3rd, 2011, Mickey Costanzo was leaving the school grounds after attending track practice. She had just entered the deserted parking lot when she spotted Cody. Mickey tried to divert around him, but Cody blocked her way and begged her to hear him out. He said that he was sorry for what had happened and that he valued her friendship and wanted to make it up to her. Despite herself, Mickey found herself drawn in by his apparent remorse. The Cody she knew had been a good friend to her for many years. Why should she throw that away because of his wacko girlfriend? Because people are crazy. That's why. When he asked her to walk with him to his car so that he could show her something, she willingly followed. In doing so, she walked directly into a trap. Cody levered the back door of the vehicle open and encouraged Mickey to look inside. The minute she did so, she was shoved hard from behind, sending her sprawling onto the seat. Then Cody was twisting her arm behind her back, and then her wrists were being secured with cable ties. "What are you doing?" Mickey screamed at him. I guarantee you she screamed more than that, but we get the gist. Cody didn't reply. He simply closed the door and then trotted around the vehicle to the driver's seat. Before starting the engine, he fired off a text to Tony saying, "I've got her." Let me tell you what. That china must have been really good that Tony was providing to Cody. Because if he was this typical popular bad boy, he could have had his pick of anybody in the school. So, yeah. Thus began a terrifying and ultimately fatal ordeal for Mickey Costanzo. After making a short detour to pick up his girlfriend, Cody drove to an unused gravel pit about 10 minutes out of town, close to the Nevada-Utah border. Okay, I still don't know why they are killing or wanting to kill this girl or do something to her when she cut off all contact with him. That was the end game, right? That was the solution. I don't understand. There, he and Tony dragged the terrified Mickey from the vehicle. All of Mickey's pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears as she was thrust to the dusty ground. Then Tony rummaged through the loading bay of the SUV and came back holding a shovel. And Mickey's reply is, "Please don't." I'm sure she was begging for her life at that point. Tony's response was to raise the shovel and bring it crashing down on her victim's head. Blow after blow rained down, inflicted with both the sharp and flat ends. Mickey was simply beaten senseless. Horrible, a horrible, utterly horrible way to die. Then Tony pinned her down by sitting on her legs, and Cody delivered the coup de grace, hacking through her throat with a box cutter. What the fuck? What? Ma'am, sir. The same instrument that he had previously drawn across her forearm. Do you know what that must have been like to cut someone's head off with a box cutter? What? Mickey Costanzo's death had been protracted and painful, filled with terror. The disposal of her remains would be undignified. The killers simply dug a shallow trench and rolled her body into it, then they covered her with dirt. That done, they crossed the border into Utah where they disposed of the murder weapon. Then they drove back into West Wendover where they scaled the wall into the public swimming pool and washed the blood from their bodies. Finally, they visited the local McDonald's for sodas, as murder is thirsty work. Wackos. I mean, how do you... You know how I understand people killing other people? Self-defense? And I understand, like, temporarily insane, like Betty Broderick. I know I always say that, but I think she just went temporarily insane when she did what she did. I think we are all capable of things like that in the right circumstances, but this seems brutal and highly unnecessary. Mickey was missed, of course. That very same night, her frantic parents reported her missing to the police. A search was launched with officers calling on Mickey's known friends and acquaintances. Cody and Tony were among those questioned. They both denied any knowledge of Mickey's whereabouts. Unfortunately for Cody, his denials would soon be exposed as a lie. The school parking lot was monitored by a security camera, and the footage told a compelling tale. You big freaking dummy. There it was, clear as day, Cody bundling the missing girl into his car and driving away with her. Wow. Confronted with this evidence, Cody broke down and confessed not just to abduction but to murder. Later that day, he led investigators to the site of Mickey's hastily evacuated grave. While officers were dispatched to deliver the heartbreaking news to Mickey's parents, Cody was charged with her murder. At this point, investigators had no inkling that anyone but Cody Patton was involved in this heinous crime. For all his many flaws, Cody turned out to be unfailingly loyal to Tony. Over the expanse of numerous interrogations, he never once mentioned her name in connection with the murder. Not even the county prosecutor's declaration that he would be seeking the death penalty against the young killer would loosen Cody's tongue. Tony Frato would likely have avoided prosecution altogether had she not decided to make a confession of her own. 6 weeks after the murder, Tony visited Cody's father and told him about her role in the killing. Why? Why would you do that? Kip Patton did not bother pressing her on the finer details. Instead, he convinced her to accompany him to his son's attorney and asked her to repeat her confession on tape. This was later handed over to the police. Perhaps Kip thought it would lessen his son's culpability for the crime. Instead, the state struck a deal with Tony, offering her immunity from the death penalty in exchange for her testimony against her boyfriend. After weeks in custody, Tony agreed. Cody Patton and Tony Frato were tried separately for the murder of Michaela Costanzo. In the end, the state did not get the death penalty it wanted against Patton. Found guilty of first-degree murder, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Frato, meanwhile, was allowed to plead to second-degree murder in exchange for her testimony. She, too, received a life sentence, although parole eligibility was not ruled out. She will have to serve at least 18 years before she is eligible. I mean, what? Horrible. I mean, just poor choices made by everybody in that situation. And, I always ask, was it worth it? No, because 3 young kids have literally lost their lives. When Tony is getting out of prison, she's going to be 33 years old. At the least. Horrible. Just horrible, horrible, horrible choices. But okay, that is all from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed hearing these stories and seeing me do some diamond painting on Twilight Rose. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.